doubts or any queries related to this internship, you can look at the FAQ section here and get information. And so for this year, the application has already begun, I think, and 22nd February is the deadline for applying. And you can have a look at the different organizations that are participating in this, and get in touch with the mentors if you want to apply, and start working on a basic proposal. So I'll explain in detail how to apply, how to make a good proposal, how to avoid making some common mistakes. Okay, so I'd like to share that here. Okay, so how to make a good application and how to avoid making certain common mistakes. So what I would suggest is, first you go through all the organizations that are participating in the particular internship program, and target one or two good projects under that organization, and try to keep your focus on those couple of projects only, because if you look at too many options, that might make you lose focus. Of course, you can ping multiple mentors, but once you start getting response from certain mentors, try to prioritize on just one or two projects and have your full attention on them. And you are expected to deliver 2 to 3 good quality code patches for your proposal. So they shouldn't be low priority random patches. For example, somebody asks you to grammatically correct a sentence inside the documentation, and you write a 2-line code, and that goes into production. So you are the author of that code, but that is not counted as a good patch. A good patch is something that is perhaps related to the project that you will be working on, and that adds a nice functionality aspect to that code base. It could be optimization of an existing code patch, or a well thought bug fix that needs some attention to detail, like understanding the code base, picking out why a certain thing is not working, making sure that you have coded it in such a way that it covers all edge cases. That kind of a patch is considered as a good patch. It could be even 10-20 lines of code, but it should be nice, good quality code. So 2 to 3 such quality patches, honestly, they won't take you more than 1 or 2 weeks to deliver. You just need to be focused on that, and they will make your base strong while proposing for these internships. And while you write whatever you worked on in your proposal, you could even write your work in progress patches. For example, if the deadline is 22nd February, the results are going to be announced on, say, March 10th. In between those 40 days, also, if you'll be working on something, you can just write a note there in your proposal that this bug is under work in progress. You're also working on this and in touch with the mentor for delivering that. So that shows sincerity. Secondly, it's important to have effective communication with mentors. So in this, whoever you are involved with, the mentor who is the particular mentors that you are working with, let them know about your thought process while you're solving problems, like while you're taking up any task. So they need to understand that you're able to understand the problem, you're able to propose a solution, you know how to handle that task. So and secondly, when you're actually writing the code, just go through minor mistakes that you can avoid, which you don't want your reviewer to point out. And after that, you can submit that, make your reviewer give you feedback. And then after that, you can once it's submitted, once it's inside the code base, that's when it's counted as an accepted patch. Then while you're applying for such internships, you need to make a timeline of your deliverables. So I'll show you one example for that. So this is something you can again discuss with your mentor, and your mentor should be convinced about your potential for being able to deliver the project with good quality and within the timeline. And another thing is, people get intimidated thinking that suppose a particular project requires you to know JavaScript, or a particular project requires you to know Python in detail. So it doesn't mean that you should have those skills while applying for the project. It's possible that you don't have that skill, but as long as you're curious and as long as you want to learn that skill, while delivering the project, you will be able to develop those skills gradually. So you don't need to bother much about whether you're eligible to apply or not. Again, while applying, it can happen that you're pinging some mentor and then the mentor is not responsive. Or for example, you've begun working on something and then the mentor stops responding. So what do you do then? That's when you can shift your pivot from the project. You can take up another project and start focusing there where you know that this project is going to get a slot. This also happens, like for example, an organization might propose 5 projects and that organization ends up getting 2 slots. So then those 2 slots will be for those projects that have high priority according to that organization. So try to have this conversation as well with the mentor, that does this project stand a chance to actually get a slot as well. So and also try to see if your mentor is responding well to you. So that's when you can move on to another project or so. And another advice is that if you target a project that is very, very competitive, like you know for sure that there are 30 interns trying to get a slot on that project, that's when you can probably think about other interesting projects where there's probably not that much crowd. That might help better your chances. Another thing is, don't stay stuck very long on any particular issue. If you are not able to go ahead with certain tasks, you can seek help from the community. So a lot of people don't know where to communicate. So there are 3 important channels of communication. One is IRC. So IRC is basically internet relay chat. This is where you will find most of the mentors, most of the community engineers of that particular organization. So you can install a good IRC client for this. Kiwi and Thunderbird are the 2 clients that I used. Similarly, there are many other clients. You just need to pick up a nickname and you need to sign in with your email address and you need to type the channel of the particular organization that you want to join, and then just introduce yourself, get in touch with the mentor by sending that mentor a DM, and then start that thread of communication. Apart from that, people are responsive on emails as well, but IRC is faster. For emails, you might get a 12-hour delayed response. Many times the time zones are different. Like you might end up working with a US based mentor while in India. So that way, try to be active either around early in the mornings or late at night after 8 p.m. or something. So yeah, basically it's about communication of whatever you're doing, the progress that you're making, and also trying to demonstrate to your mentor that you will be able to deliver that on time. So before I move on to my other I'll just show what the website of GSOC looks like. So this is the portal for Google. Again, organizations done. So for 2020, these were the organizations. So then select that particular organization. Here you get information about what kind of projects will be there. So this is called the ideas list page. And this is where you can see the projects. So this will point you to the particular GitHub page for this project. And it will show you whatever information that you want. It will also give you the contact details or the mentor addresses of email addresses of the mentors who will be participating. And again, a year before this, probably these were the people who worked on these projects. So for every person who has worked on it, they have a section where you can see the kind of things that they have done. So this is how the site looks like. And all application happens on this site itself. So you can just make an account, sign in with Gmail, and there you can see your application progress. You can make a draft and keep editing it till the deadline. Yeah. Okay. So after this, I'd like to talk about my experience with the Linux Foundation. So this was around a month before I graduated in autumn 2017 when I applied for this. So this was basically work on a project called OPNFV, which was for developing a stress test monitoring dashboard using three new technologies. One was a time series database called Prometheus. Another was this graphical dashboard called Grafana, and uh, a plugin called CollectD that was used for getting logs like related to memory or system related logs that was supposed to be like shown periodically on this dashboard in Grafana. So here I received mentorship from an ex Huawei engineer, and also got to interact with different Linux Foundation leaders, and got to present my work at OPNFV Plugfest in France in 2018. So this was a nice industry related experience again. And I was working with a startup in Bangalore in 2017. That's when I was also interested with like had an interest for databases, and I came across MariaDB and the interesting story behind it. So basically, MariaDB is a fork of MySQL. MySQL was basically sold to Sun Microsystems, but the founders wanted to keep a part of it open source. So the point at which it was sold, made commercialized, from that point on, they forked out a branch called MariaDB, and they began independent development of this themselves, the main founders of MySQL. So MariaDB was an independently maintained open source project, whereas MySQL was a project that was like commercialized. And My and Maria are the names of the founder, Michael Videnius, his daughters. So Mai was his elder daughter and Maria was his younger daughter. That's how these names came to be. And basically, here I was working part time along with my full time job with a slightly lesser commitment of time. But in the long run, I would say this is not sustainable. But I got to learn a lot during whatever time I was there. I was working on the privilege system, working on adding a command called deny to the database. So right from adding that to the compiler grammar, to the lex, to actually coding out the functionality, to actually having that like shown as a command line command that users can use. It was a nice learning experience, but because the code base is in C++, and C++ is by far a very difficult language that I have come across. Like compared to the other languages, it's very difficult to debug in C++. But the work is again very satisfying, and very highly performant and low latency systems are developed using C++ as a language. So again, this is really nice work when it comes to databases. So about proposals, I would like to share a sample proposal with you, and the kind of structure that you can follow. So one is writing the abstract. So abstract is about the motivation behind the project, why you want to do the project, what all comes inside that project. I mean, a basic idea of the vision, the motivation behind the project. Then you can add a section for technical details, like what is that project about, and what's the current status quo of the project, and what are you trying to add on to it, and how do you try to add that on. Then the other thing that I was talking about was this timeline, right? So this is very important. What you need to do is you need to propose a week by week timeline of the kind of tasks that you'll be working on, breaking down the scope of the project into weekly or bi-weekly timelines. That, for example, first week will be spent reaching out to the community, getting to know more about the project, understanding the code base. Second week is when you start, say, exploring the current tools that are present. Third week is when you actually start building a prototype. Then you again start coding a little bit, and then you get a basic prototype out by midterm, by the middle of the project, till the sixth week. After that, you start again adding some more detailed functionalities. So week 7, week 8 is on that. Week 9 is on collecting feedback for the tool that is developed, and keep working on that, keep enhancing it. Then week 10th is for like, again, it's ready for review, and this is like a buffer week where you want more feedback to come in. And just in case you slipped any deadline, this is like another week where you get to do that. And then you get several iterations of reviews, right? It's just not one review and it's done. You'll get a lot of comments from the mentors, and you'll have to keep making changes. Many times you've implemented one thing in one way, and there's a more optimal way of looking at it, like solving the same problem, that you come to know only when the review comments are out. So you need to keep iterating. And then finally all of that gets pushed and it's integrated in the main system of the industry, and that's when your project is done. So end to end, it's a very nice experience. And then it's good to have a prototype inside your proposal. For example, when I was making this proposal, I had also sort of imagined that this is how my tool would look like. So I made certain mocks of this and even added that. So that kind of thing. After that, they ask you for the kind of patches that you've worked on. So if you like while applying, you need to show the kind of code that you've already pushed in. So that's when this comes into picture. Right. So this is where you link in your patches. And after that, there's a motivational question around why that organization, like why are you applying to that organization? So again, here you need to be clear about your vision and other things. Okay. So hope that helps you understand the kind of structure that they look for. And yeah, after this, I'll be talking about what I'm working on currently. I'm working with an open source startup called Gina AI. But before that, I'd like to talk about my PS2 experiences in very short. So yeah, I was working with Amazon Bangalore for my first semester of PS. Since I was a dual degree student, I had 2 semesters for doing PS. So I was working with this team called Media Shopping and Experience. This team dealt with different books and video series that are made available on Amazon. So this was basically working on random, like not one big project for 6 months, but few features, minor features on like with this team over a period of 5 months. So this was a nice experience overall. And my second semester was with NVIDIA, where I got to work end to end for 5 months on a POC for doing high frequency detection on videos. So I had to basically break down a video into screenshots, like at particular, say, frames per second kind of screenshots, and then use open source libraries like OpenCV for doing analysis on that screenshot using different algorithms, and detect which portions of that image can be classified as high frequency and which portions of the image can be classified as low frequency. So this was a very fulfilling and nice project. And yeah, after that, I was basically working with Nutanix, which is a unicorn startup. So when I joined the company, there were around 6,000 employees, and fewer than that, there might be engineers. And the main product that Nutanix has is called Xi. So this is a distributed hypervisor product, which is the core. So my team was called Epoch. So what my team was doing was developing monitoring and alerting systems for the main product Xi. So in case there is some outage or any high priority issue, this alerting and monitoring helps them detect these issues way beforehand and take measures that can help them save disasters happening to the product. So this involved learning different tech stacks like Kubernetes and time series databases like Druid. And after that, soon after that, I got into Google Hyderabad, which was the dream company for me. And I was of the thought process that once I get into Google, this is where I'll be sticking around for the next 5 to 10 years of my life at least. But over a period of time, my perception changed. Again, this is my personal point of view. But yeah, I mean, the culture is amazing. The people around are really nice, helpful. You get to work on a variety of projects. I was working on full stack tools for Google Ads, Cloud, Safe Browsing. And in my 20% capacity, I was also working with the Google Assistant team based out of Zurich on a prototype for developing push notifications for people who land at airports. They'll basically end up getting a push notification about the luggage belt where their luggage is going to arrive. So uh, those were nice projects, but the overall picture is that uh, generally I was a lateral hire at Google and experience. So generally, if you apply to a bigger company, they sometimes over a period of time you realize that you're not growing as fast as you could grow compared to what the rate at which you were growing when you were at a unicorn startup, or when you were at a like a very early stage startup with higher responsibilities, with a clear path and a vision, with faster promotions, and so on. So the thing was, suppose there were say 20 people working under the same manager. Many times this happens that they have a fixed number of slots for promotions, and you might be very hardworking, you might be deserving everything, but you still end up missing that promotion just because of various reasons that are not in your control. And many times the kind of projects that bigger organizations give you would be migrations. Like there will be a legacy system 10 years old, and they want to migrate the same system from say version A to version B, and you are not adding anything innovative, you are not doing anything different here as such. You are just focusing on migrating from one end, like from one kind of a thing to another. That is not very satisfying all the time, like especially if you like. I personally am a fan of developing something from scratch, and I like to look at a problem on paper, then come up with a SaaS solution to it, and be able to actually see it getting delivered in the industry. So this debate will always be there: startup versus tech giant. What is best at what point of the career? So, what I would give you as an advice would be, you should first try to identify the particular domain that you're interested in. If you're interested in machine learning and artificial intelligence, then doing general software development work, even at a company like Microsoft or Google, doesn't make sense because you want to work in AI and ML, but you're not working there. So try to get into the place that will give you that kind of work, because in the long run, that domain knowledge is important. Even if you try to go for a team switch from a non-machine learning team to a machine learning team within a big team, they will end up giving priority to people who have actual industry experience in that domain. Right. And again, you should analyze the growth and risk opportunities at both places. So at bigger companies, for sure, the growth is not too fast. And people who are hired laterally at a larger tech company will be paid more than the people who have been there since a lot of years. This is like an irony. But again, it's up to you when to choose what. And when it comes to risk, definitely a tech company is secure and stable job wise, but a startup is more risky, but it will give you very fast growth for sure. So try to go to that place where you will be recognized for your work, where you will get a nice challenging learning curve. And when you feel that okay, you've learned a lot, you've achieved as much as you could, whatever your potential is, then try to look at switches. And that's the general approach that I followed. Now, talking about the kind of work that I'm doing right now. So I'm working with this organization called Gina AI since September 2020. So I was basically looking at different open source artificial intelligence organizations, and I basically read the Linux Foundation blogs once in a while. That's when I came across this newly started project called Gina by the founders of. So I came in touch with Han Zhao. He is basically the innovator of BERT as a service concept. He was working with Tencent AI Labs with the search infra team of WeChat. So WeChat is like WhatsApp for China. So he was involved with search algorithms and had experience working with open source. So he left his job there and started this startup, which right now has $7.4 million funding. And this was in the deep learning and neural search domain. And I started contributing to the code base and really liked the product. And I was one of the first 4 engineers. And I decided to take the call of moving into the team because it had a lot of velocity, the rate at which they were developing the product. They were trying to get the latest state of the art artificial intelligence models into the product. And this was pretty risky, but I've been learning a lot. And I'm satisfied by the fact that I'm aligned to the domain in which I want to contribute for the long term. And this is something very different because this concept of commercial open source startups is fairly new. And this is here to stay because this is sort of revolutionizing the software industry in general. Because when you're working with a corporate, you're working for a particular business use case where you're supposed to code out a product with a specific set of requirements that comes from the product managers. It may not necessarily be what you're passionate about, and it may not be the most innovative thing that you're working on, and it may not give you the scope of doing research and developing domain knowledge. But when it comes to open source software, you know for sure that your work is going to be visible everywhere. Like it's going to have global visibility. You get the opportunity to talk at top tech conferences. You get to work remotely, and working remote has its own pros and cons. The best pro is it gives you core flexibility. You can work from anywhere. And in general, the pay is sort of standardized, like not much variation in general. So and these kinds of startups are coming up right now. So in future, this will be the trend, I believe. So yeah, that's it from my end as far as the content is. And I'd like to discuss any questions that you have and answer them.
Hey, Rituja.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you worked so much on open source and all these software development things. So when you applied to Google, did they have DSA type and competitive coding type questions in the coding round? Did you have to clear such thing?
Yeah. So I gave in total 14 interview rounds for Google. And in my first attempt, I was rejected. And it was in the second attempt when I made it through. The idea is how Google interviews work. I can basically give you a short idea about that. So it will always be, each interview round will be a 45-minute round where they'll ask you 2 data structures and algorithm related questions, each for about 15 to 20 minutes. So what you're expected to do is understand the question, have a very raw whiteboard implementation of that problem. This doesn't involve any programming language at all. They are just looking at how you're able to analyze the problem, how you're able to solve the problem. They might give you hints in between. Are you able to come down to the most optimal solution? And after that, they give you around 5 to 10 minutes to write down the code. So you can choose any language of your choice. It could be Python, Java. I chose Java because I was pretty familiar with the collections library that has quick implementations of different data structures. So on a blank Google Doc, you're supposed to write that code. So, and the idea is to constantly keep talking with the interviewer, explaining him your approach, and picking up the hints and optimizing on the spot, and being able to analyze the time and space complexity of those problems. So it will be 15 to 20 minutes on one kind of question, 15 to 20 minutes on another question, then 5 minutes will be a general open discussion where you get to talk to the interviewer, ask them about their experiences in the company and so on. And there'll be 5 such rounds, and then there'll be a hiring community that gives feedback based on 5 levels. So there are different levels here. One is strongly higher, that is something that people rarely get. Another one is higher. Third is leaning higher. Leaning higher is like not sure, like it's okay if you take the candidate. Fourth is no higher, and fifth is like definitely a no higher, that kind of system. So in order to be able to clear and get a like a hire from the hiring committee, you should not have any no hires. You should not avoid having leaning hires. You should either have hires or strong hires in general. And in case yours is a borderline case, they request you for more rounds of interviews. So I was requested for more rounds of interviews as well. So overall, it will be an analysis that's done by the hiring committee. The people in the hiring committee are different from the people who interview you. This removes the bias from the hiring system. And then the offer committee is different from the hiring committee. And after a long process that can span over several months, you will hear back the results. Yeah, so data structures and algorithms is something you should practice for sure. But it's not about doing 700, 800 lead code problems. You could very well do just 60 to 70 quality level problems, say 3 to 4 problems per kind of data structure or algo. Even medium level problems should be sufficient in general. But yeah, try to understand the concepts and fundamentals behind each of those data structures and algorithms. And I was using this book called Cracking the Coding Interview, called CTCI, by Gail Lackman. This is an excellent resource, and this is something that I would highly recommend students to solve. It will give you a very nice grip over fundamentals while basically interviewing with any company, not just a bigger org.
Yeah. Now, like I have shared a Google Doc which has a list of questions that people have like added before we started. So like now we can go to that Google Doc.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I'll take up the first question. It's from a second year student. Is it too late to start contributing? Okay, so I started contributing in my third year, second semester. And up until my second year, I was just feeling overwhelmed by all the people who were talking about GSOC, and I didn't even know what and where and how to start. So that's when I first came to know about what IRC is, Internet Relay Chat. And I had a tough time making my account, downloading Thunderbird on my HP laptop, and setting up all the things that are needed on it. And I was using a deprecated version of Ubuntu 13.1, where even apt-get update and installations were a pain to do. So definitely, like, it was a tough start for me. But it happened in my 3-2. So I think second year is a very good time to start. Like, I wish I was more active then. So it's definitely not too late to start contributing. Few tricks and tips that you could remember is getting active on these channels where you find the mentors. So number one is you basically scroll through that site where you see organizations. Then you can pick up the organization that you want to contribute to, reach out to mentors, start that email communication or IRC communication thread with those people, and just hop onto the code base. Try to understand it. It's not that difficult, and you can develop those skills on the fly. It's definitely possible. Okay. Any more questions around this, like when to start and how to start?
I think what like the question asker meant is that like is February too late to start?
No. So I started around 2 to 3 weeks before the deadline. I had just 2 to 3 weeks, but I was like 80% of my time was on that application. That I can tell you. So 2 to 3. Okay, should I move on to the second question?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so this is from a student who knows programming and who knows how to solve problems on coding platforms up till the medium level. But he or she is also interested in actually contributing to projects and building things, especially with open source. organizations. So how to capitalize GSOC for that? So yeah, like I said, this is like a very good starting point for you, where you first of all get to engage with the mentor community. So again, how to go about finding what you like. Try to read up on what each of these organizations are doing, and that way you will find something that interests you. And once you find that particular domain or that particular org, try to look at the kind of projects they are offering. And then definitely there'll be a link to their GitHub page where you can get a high level understanding of the code. After that, try to reach out, ask whatever questions you have to the mentors, and ask for a good first issue. So another thing that I would like to show you is how to pick up these good first issues from any GSOC organization. So let's say, let me open a sample GitHub repo. Yeah. So when you go to any project, right, on GitHub, this is where you get to see the issues, and this is where you get to see the open issues also. And each of these issues have a tag. For example, good first issue. So what you can do is you can try understanding the code base, then you can have a look at the issues. Then there'll be some issues called good first issues, or issues titled as for GSOC, or low hanging fruits. You can just pick those, understand those issues, uh, ping the author of that particular issue, or ping on the issue saying that you're interested in taking that up but just need some more context around it, and then start making that first 2-liner 3-liner contribution to the code. Raise a pull request here, understand how GitHub works. 3-4 things that you need to understand that are very standard: how to fork a project, how to create your own branch, how to write code, how to push code, create a pull request, and get into the review process. So understanding GitHub version control is a good starting point. So without GitHub, things won't move forward. So try to get yourself familiar with GitHub. This is one advice I would like to give to the first yearites, second yearites, everybody in general. So yeah, this is how you can make your first contribution and start building on that. After that, you'll get the confidence. You'll know how the entire code cycle works end to end, and then pick up on a task that has higher scope. And that's how you can start building on things. First is understanding the existing code base, and second is proposing functionality to that and start coding. Okay. So the third question is, I've heard GSOC is different from coding and normal IT things. What is it all about, and how do we start preparing from it? So yeah, definitely it's very different from what a normal software company does. This is basically, most of the open source projects are frameworks that are used by different organizations, by students, by developers, by different companies in general. It's like they are based for doing a lot of things. So it's like the core of the software that they use many times. So and whereas something that you work for in an industry is related to business in general, and it is very much dependent on the kind of product that you're working on, the kind of requirements the product manager lets the engineering manager know, and then it trickles down to the program managers, and then it comes down to the senior level engineers. They break it down and assign it to the junior level engineers. That's how it works in a software role in general. Okay. The fourth question is, I am in third year, second semester right now. How can I contribute to open source, and what should be a general roadmap? So I think my previous discussions sort of answered this already. Yeah. After learning Git and GitHub, how to proceed further with open source? So yeah, just like I showed you this issues page, just get in touch with the poster of the issue, the author of that issue, and fork the code base, start making contributions to the project, make a pull request, get it reviewed, and eventually it'll get merged. And after that, as you engage with the community, with the engineers that are working with that particular project, ask them for higher functionality related stuff. Definitely there's a lot of work always, so they are more than happy to have a contributor contributing to the code base. Okay. Yeah. The sixth question has three parts. First is why GSOC? Okay, so main motivation behind getting engaged in such internships is that, first of all, they give you a huge boost for your resume. And this is like your first entry point into the coding industry for doing development that is actually useful. Because in college, what you do is very theoretical, and this is your first practical application of the programming and the skills that you have learned. And first of all, you get to develop skills that you will not learn in uh, a college environment. For example, writing industry level Python code or writing in JavaScript, you will not do this in college otherwise, right? It will always be from a theoretical point of view. So this will be a practical application of these skills, and you will end up learning these skills which are very useful for the industry. It will help you in your interviews for your full-time jobs also. Next question is it useful only for CS undergrads? I don't think so, because there are certain kinds of projects that have a very broader vision. Like it could be an ML project for an automotive industry. It could be it there's a lot of diversity in the kind of projects and the kind of vision that the project has. It could be useful for people who want to have a career in data science as well, for example. And in general, learning skills like Python will be very useful no matter what branch you'll be uh, like looking at. Okay, how to begin, when to start, and where to start? I think the previous discussion also covers that, I believe. What I can focus on is the time management aspect. Okay, so right now you're already in, like there's a semester going on right now, right, in college? Is it like T1, T2 time or something like that?
Yes, semester is going on and mid-sem is about to start from 1st March.
Okay. So yeah, in my case, it was kind of colliding with the exam timings at times, but I think 2 to 3 weeks is a decent time to dedicate even half time to contributing to this and half time towards preparing for your tests. So these are the days when you need to be little more active than your normal kind of days, because the deadline is pretty harsh. So those 10-15 days will be very hectic, but I'm sure they are manageable, especially when you're choosing something that you want to work on uh, during the duration of the internship. Yeah. When should one ideally begin preparing for their GSOC? So I think even if you're not selected in the first go, you definitely learn a lot of things which prepare you well for your second go as well. But ideally, I think even if you are in it, say 3 to 4 weeks before the deadline, that is also a fair sort of timeline to aim for. Okay. And the last question here is, how do we read and understand large organizations' code bases on GitHub? Okay. So few tips here would be, first of all, you should know the place where these code bases are hosted, the particular GitHub project. And then there will be, like, if it's a well documented project, each module of that project will have a README where you will understand high level details of that project. And within the code, also, there will be documentation, there will be doc strings around the functions, what function is doing what, and you will know a higher level, you will get a higher level picture of uh, the code. and there are mentors who are there to help you out for things that you're not understanding well. So try to get more engaged with the community, and that will be super helpful. Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions you would want to ask them live?
Hi, Rutuja. We have one question like in the chat.
Okay. Okay. How many organizations at max to focus for contribution in GSOC? I will say two, because again, anything more than that might make you lose focus again. And within that organization itself, you can look at multiple projects and try to get an understanding of which project is likely to get a slot for sure, and try to get engaged with the mentors, and look at what interests you the most, and uh, how responsive your mentor is. And yeah, you can focus on two, but I would not recommend focus on more than two orgs.
If I'm applying for outreachy as well, then should I look for organizations that both outreachy and GSOC to be able to focus better?
Okay, so generally there'll be an overlap between organizations both for outreachy and GSOC, but both of them will have different projects and different mentors. So you can apply for both, but at a time you can only work for one of them. Like if you're selected for both GSOC and outreachy, then they'll give you priority for working for GSOC. I mean, then they'll give another slot to an outreachy person, and you will be like doing the GSOC internship only. Yeah, like I had applied for these two programs at two different points of time. Like I never applied for both of them simultaneously, because it gets a little hectic for sure. But yeah, you can do that if you're targeting the same org and one project for outreach and one project for GSOC. That is possible. Any more questions?
So in terms of GSOC and outreachy, like which one is easier to like get into? I mean, if I mean right now it's pretty late, so like what would be easier, like more probability of getting selected?
Okay. It really depends on the particular project, I think, because the awareness of both these internships is like a lot right now. Earlier, OPW or GSOC was not known that much, but now it's I think a lot of people already know about it. But like definitely, still I would say outreach is easier than GSOC, because the community that applies for it is not that huge. Any more questions, anyone? Okay, I think we're done then. Thank you so much, Rutuja, for this session. It was extremely helpful. Thank you, everyone else, for joining, and best of luck. And thank you, Rutuja. Thank you for taking out the time for this. And we hope to see you all soon in whatever next session we plan on. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.